My mom looked me in the eye and said, "You don't matter," so I raised my glass and said 3 sentences that left her ghost white. "You're nobody. Don't pretend you matter." That's how Sunday brunch started. Mom said it like she was commenting on the weather, casual as ordering coffee. And my brother Mark, golden boy Mark, chimed right in with, "Honestly, we forget you exist half the time." They both laughed like it was some hilarious inside joke I was supposed to appreciate. I didn't laugh. I tapped my fork gently against my mimosa glass, the sound small but sharp, cutting through their chuckles. "This won't take long," I said quietly. "Just 3 sentences." By the second sentence, Mom's face had drained of all color. I didn't cry. Didn't even blink. When you grow up with people like mine, you learn to wear your expression like armor, blank, unreadable. You don't give them ammunition to use against you later. They call it brunch, but let's be honest. It's Sunday lunch with bottomless mimosas and backhanded compliments. The menu rotates between eggs Benedict and French toast, but the atmosphere stays the same, cold, sharp-edged, laced with subtle cruelty. Halfway through Mom's overpriced avocado toast, she slipped into her usual role, family critic. She treats meals like performance reviews, though I was never hired for the job I'm supposedly failing at. "You're nobody," she repeated, tone as casual as reading the wine list. Mark, whose biggest life achievement is maintaining a perfect credit score while living rent-free, echoed her sentiment with his trademark smirk. He grinned like we were at a comedy roast and everyone was supposed to find it hilarious. I didn't. Instead, I clinked my fork against my glass again. Just once. Then, "This won't take long. Just 3 sentences." That got their attention. Mom paused mid-bite of her artisanal sourdough. David, her husband since I was 16, the man who replaced my father like old furniture, leaned forward like I was about to perform a magic trick. Mark looked genuinely puzzled for once in his privileged life. I reached into my designer knockoff purse and pulled out a black manila folder. Nothing fancy, no dramatic flourishes. Just slid it across the white tablecloth toward her. David squinted at it like he expected concert tickets. Mark looked like I'd handed him homework, foreign and unwelcome. Mom didn't move at first. She just stared, then slowly reached for it with manicured fingers. She opened the cover. Flipped to page 2. Then 3. I watched her face transform in slow motion, like someone realizing their brakes had failed and the cliff was rushing up fast. Her perfectly steady hands started trembling. David's confident smirk vanished completely. Mark froze with his fork halfway to his mouth, eggs Benedict growing cold. She reached the final page. "You little," she whispered. David shot to his feet so fast his chair legs screeched across the restaurant's polished hardwood. "You said you deleted that stuff." I stood too, calmly adjusting my cardigan, picking up my purse with deliberate care. "The originals are with people who actually matter," I said, voice steady as granite. "That copy's just for you. Enjoy your meal." Then I walked out, leaving them with their shock and my 3 sentences hanging in the air like smoke. But to understand why that moment felt so perfect, we need to rewind 3 months earlier, when I told them I was broke and needed help. 3 months before that perfect brunch moment, I'd called Mom with my carefully rehearsed sob story. I lost my apartment, I told her, letting just the right amount of desperation creep into my voice. The startup I was working for went under. I have nowhere else to go. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, "Well, you can't just live here for free, Avril. This isn't a charity." They let me move back into my childhood home in Westfield, but not kindly. Mom made it crystal clear from day one, I'd pay rent, handle chores, and keep my opinions to myself. Meanwhile, Mark lived there completely rent-free, job-free, responsibility-free. His biggest contribution to household management was leaving dirty dishes in the sink and offering unsolicited commentary on everyone else's life choices. They gave me the laundry room. Not the guest bedroom, not even my old room, which had been converted into David's home office, but the actual laundry room. There was a stackable washer-dryer unit that rattled like a freight train every night, shaking the thin walls until I felt like I was sleeping inside a maraca. Every time those machines rumbled to life at 2 a.m., I reminded myself, just a little longer. I wasn't there to reconnect with family. I wasn't desperate or homeless. I was hunting. I knew there were secrets buried in that house, things they'd never imagine I could find. And I planned to uncover every single one. But you'd never guess my real agenda watching me during those Sunday brunches at the Garden Cafe. I passed the orange juice, complimented David's terrible dad jokes about millennials ruining the napkin industry, smiled graciously when Mom handed me things like she was bestowing royal favors. "Thank you so much," I'd say, voice dripping gratitude I didn't feel. Nobody asked about my job search. Nobody wondered what I was actually working on during those long days alone in the house. The only attention I received was Mom asking, "You still driving that little Honda?" with the kind of disdain usually reserved for discussing expired milk. Christmas that year was particularly telling. Mark got an Apple Watch and a paid vacation to Cabo for his mental health journey. I got a mug that said "World's okayest daughter," clearly grabbed from a gas station on their way home from somewhere more important. I spent Christmas morning scrubbing baseboards while Mark Liv tweeted his breakfast. So no, what happened at brunch wasn't exactly planned in advance, but the groundwork was definitely ready. When I saw Mom's face go pale, when I watched David's eyes dart toward the exit like he was calculating escape routes, when Mark's mouth actually stayed shut for the first time in years, I knew I'd landed the perfect hit. I didn't need to raise my voice or make threats. I just needed to present the truth, backed by documentation they couldn't dismiss or explain away. And I was nowhere near finished with them. The real story started years earlier, when I was 12 years old and my entire world got rearranged by one text message. People talk about their childhoods like sitcom episodes, embarrassing family stories retold with fond laughter at holiday gatherings. Mine wasn't like that. My childhood felt like a group project where I did all the work but still got blamed when things went wrong. On the surface, we looked picture perfect: holiday cards with matching sweaters, family vacations to Disney World, refrigerator covered with Mark's finger paint masterpieces like he was the next Picasso. But underneath the glossy exterior, everything felt conditional and cold. I was invisible until I made mistakes. Mark was the golden child who could throw tantrums and be cold passionate. I spilled apple juice once and got grounded for being dramatic and attention-seeking. I used to wonder if they simply forgot I existed. When I was 9, I won a small art contest at school, nothing major, just a local thing, but I was proud. I brought the certificate home and handed it to Mom, beaming with excitement. She glanced at it briefly, then said, "You should really focus on math and science, sweetie. Art won't pay the bills." That same week, Mark brought home a participation ribbon for Best Listener from summer camp. She framed it and hung it in the kitchen where everyone could see. These moments accumulate like sediment, layer after layer, until they compress your self-worth into something small and dense. You start believing maybe you really are the problem, less interesting, less worthy of attention and love. Dad was different. He was the only one who never treated me like background noise. Quiet and steady, never flashy or dramatic, but he showed up consistently. He helped with homework, listened when I talked about books, actually remembered details from our conversations. He made the world's best grilled cheese sandwiches and never made me feel like loving him was a burden. I never understood why Mom treated him like his very existence was a personal failure she had to endure. But I understand now. And so does she. The day everything shattered, I was 12, sitting in our living room eating plain popcorn and half watching some show I didn't care about. Mark was upstairs playing video games. Mom was scrolling through her phone with that distracted expression she always wore. Then she turned off the TV and said she had something important to show me. Those words never mean anything good in my family. She held out her iPhone with a text message displayed on the screen. "This is from your father," she said, voice heavy with manufactured concern. "You need to understand what kind of person he really is." The message was short, just one sentence that would rearrange my entire reality. "If you take her from me, I'll kill you both." I stared at those words, my 12-year-old brain struggling to process what I was seeing. My mind felt like a computer trying to run software it wasn't equipped for, just spinning and spinning without finding solid ground. "He's dangerous," Mom said, rubbing my back in what I now recognize as a performance of maternal protection. "I always sensed something was off about him. I'm filing for full custody to keep you safe, sweetheart." I didn't cry immediately, just sat there in shocked silence like someone had yanked the foundation out from under our house and I was still falling through empty space. What came next happened quickly. Court dates, new rules, supervised visits that became no visits, phone calls that stopped entirely. Dad was erased from my life like a character deleted from a script, and I was expected to be grateful for my rescue. But that message never felt right. It wasn't the man I remembered, the one who cried at the end of Finding Nemo, who said, "I love you" every time we talked, who never raised his voice unless someone was about to get hurt. The questions started piling up in my 20s, until I couldn't ignore them anymore. The ache got louder in my 20s. Questions I'd buried as a scared 12-year-old started clawing their way to the surface, demanding answers I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. One sleepless night when I was 23, that message kept looping through my mind like a broken record: "If you take her from me, I'll kill you both." The words felt foreign, like they'd been written in a language my father had never spoken. On impulse, I picked up my phone and typed, "Hi. I don't know if this is still your number, but I wanted to say hello. It's Avril." 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Avril? Oh my God. I've thought about you every single day." We met 3 days later at Riverside Park, neutral ground, somewhere public where I could escape if this version of my father turned out to be the dangerous man Mom had described. I braced myself to see someone hardened by years of bitterness, maybe unstable or angry. Instead, I saw Dad. Older, grayer, wearing the same brand of jeans he'd always preferred, but still fundamentally him. Still the man who used to make funny voices when reading bedtime stories. 2 cups of coffee in, I worked up the courage to ask about the message that had changed everything. He didn't hesitate, didn't get defensive or angry. Just shook his head slowly and said, "Avril, I never sent that. I would never threaten anyone, especially not you or your mother." He didn't try to guilt me about the years of silence or break down crying about what he'd lost. He just said he was sorry I'd carried that fear for so long, and something deep inside me finally went quiet for the first time in over a decade. I believed him. Not because he had evidence or proof, he didn't. But because some part of me that had been holding its breath for years finally exhaled. That's when I started digging. Not with some elaborate master plan, just instinct and growing certainty that I'd been living inside someone else's lie. I got serious about it. Enrolled in courses, earned certifications, became a licensed private investigator. Not the trench coat and cigarettes kind, the paperwork and database searches kind. Digital forensics, background checks, following paper trails that people thought they'd buried. When I was ready, I went back home with my sob story about being broke and needing a place to stay. Mom barely looked up from her yoga app before assigning me the laundry room. Perfect. While she made sure I earned my keep with chores and rent payments, I went exploring. The house was full of hiding spots I discovered as a curious kid, spaces behind furniture, forgotten boxes in closets, old computers Mom thought were safely password protected. Eventually, I found it. An ancient laptop shoved behind winter sweaters in the hall closet, covered in dust like a forgotten relic. Password protected, but nothing too sophisticated, just her maiden name plus Mark's birth year. Inside were folders with names like legal_documents, asset_backup, and one simply labeled D that made my stomach drop. I opened that folder with shaking hands. There it was, a Word document containing the draft of the message that had destroyed my relationship with my father: "If you take her from me, I'll kill you both." Created 5 days before Mom claimed it had been sent. Complete with revision history, margin notes, and even a comment bubble that read "too dramatic." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing this was just the beginning of what I was about to uncover. The fake message was just the appetizer. The real feast of deception was waiting in other folders, organized with a kind of methodical care that told me this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. This had been planned, calculated, executed with precision. I found email chains between Mom and David dating back to when they were supposedly just friends. They were discussing strategies for making my father look unstable, talking about protecting assets and securing the future. David wasn't some innocent bystander who'd fallen for a struggling single mother. He'd been her accomplice from the beginning. One email from Mom made my blood run cold. "The custody thing should be straightforward once we establish the threat pattern. David says his lawyer friend can expedite everything if we have documentation." David's response: "Already working on the financial transfer. The Cayman account is ready. Just need to time everything right." They'd been planning to steal everything while positioning themselves as victims. In another folder labeled financial_backup, I discovered bank records, wire transfer receipts, documentation for shell companies set up in David's name. Mom had told everyone, family, friends, the court, that Dad had lost everything in a bad investment during the divorce. Half our assets just vanished, she'd claimed tearfully to anyone who'd listen. The truth was uglier and more deliberate. They'd systematically moved money offshore, created fake companies to hide assets, then used the fabricated threat message to justify emergency custody changes. They'd stolen the house, Dad's business accounts, his investment portfolio, everything. Left him with nothing but a ruined reputation and supervised visitation rights he couldn't afford to fight. I sat in that laundry room at 2 a.m., surrounded by printed evidence, feeling like I was seeing my entire childhood through a different lens. Every family dinner where they talked about Dad's financial irresponsibility. Every time Mark had smugly mentioned how much better off we were without that loser. Every birthday and Christmas where I'd felt guilty for missing someone they'd painted as dangerous. It had all been lies. Carefully constructed, legally documented lies designed to steal a man's entire life.